A reporter thought he could humiliate Barron Trump in front of a crowd he wasn't ready for. What happened next? The grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria in Beverly Hills shimmered under the glow of chandeliers, each crystal reflecting the wealth and status of the attendees. Tonight wasn't just any gathering. It was one of those events, a charity gala, where high society came not just to donate, but to be seen. The air carried the scent of expensive cologne and aged whiskey, blending with the polished conversations of moguls, Hollywood elites, and political insiders. Some guests came for the networking, others came for the spectacle, and then there were those who came for the drama, the kind of subtle but calculated social maneuvering that could make or break a reputation overnight. Among the sea of designer tuxedos and glittering gowns, Barron Trump stood apart not because he tried to. Quite the opposite. At 18, he was already taller than most men in the room, his presence impossible to ignore. He had inherited his father's stature, but carried himself with a different energy, quite a more reserved, yet undeniably composed. He wasn't there to impress. He wasn't there to play politics. But that didn't mean the room wasn't watching him. "That's him, right?" whispered a woman in a deep emerald dress, leaning slightly toward her companion. "Yeah, he's grown a lot," the man beside her replied, glancing at Barron over the rim of his whiskey glass. "Hard to believe he's already 18. I wonder if he's like his father," someone else murmured, their voice just low enough to seem discreet, but loud enough to be overheard. That was the question, wasn't it? From the moment Barron Trump was old enough to appear in public, the world had speculated about him. Was he another heir to the family name? Would he step into politics? Or was he just another privileged kid who would fade into the background once the headlines moved on? What no one had considered, what no one had even thought to ask, was who Barron actually was. Across the room, a man adjusted his tie, watching Barron with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. Michael Rourke had built his career on sharp commentary and blistering takedowns. A seasoned journalist with a well-known disdain for the Trump family, he had spent years deconstructing their every move, picking apart their words, and turning them into headlines. And now, standing at the bar, swirling his glass absent-mindedly, he saw an opportunity. Rourke wasn't just any guest. He was a calculated presence, the kind of person who always seemed to be where the conversation was hottest. And tonight the conversation was hottest. Rich kids always fold when you hit them with a little reality, Rourke had once said on his podcast, discussing the children of high-profile figures. They've never had to fight for anything. They crack under pressure. But tonight Rourke wasn't behind a microphone. He was in the same room just a few steps away. And if he played his cards right, he could make Barron Trump his next headline. So he set his glass down, straightened his cuffs, and started walking toward him. But Barron wasn't the easy target Rourke thought he was. Michael Rourke moved through the crowd with the ease of a man who had spent years navigating rooms like this. He was used to being the smartest person in the conversation, the one who could dismantle an argument with a well-placed smirk or a pointed remark. But tonight he wasn't looking for a debate. He was looking for a moment. And Barron Trump, he was the perfect target. Rourke knew the rules of high society. You don't outright insult someone. You nudge them, you prod them in front of an audience. You make a comment just biting enough to cut, but just light-hearted enough to pass as banter. It was an art form, and Rourke was a master reaching Barron. He stopped just close enough to command attention, but not so close as to seem aggressive. The conversations around them softened, as if people sensed something was about to happen. With a practiced smirk, Rourke raised his glass in a mock toast. "Well, if it isn't the young prince himself," he said, his voice smooth, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. A couple of guests exchanged glances. Some chuckled softly, unsure whether to engage. Others sipped their drinks, eyes flickering between Rourke and Barron, waiting to see how the young man would respond. Barron didn't react. He barely acknowledged the remark. Roc, unfazed, took a slow sip of his drink before continuing. "Must be nice," he mused, drawing out the words, "growing up in a golden tower, never knowing a day of struggle. I imagine life's been effortless." A few hushed chuckles rippled through the group. It wasn't an outright attack, but it was enough to stir the air around them. Barron remained still if the words affected him. He didn't show it. Rourke tilted his head slightly, Watching him, he had seen men much older than Barron's squirm under a little pressure, stumble over their words, try to laugh off the discomfort. But the young Trump didn't fidget. He didn't force a smile, he just stood there unreadable. Rourke took another sip, letting the silence stretch, before delivering the next line. You ever had a real problem, Barron? He let the question linger. Ever had to worry about rent? About your future, or have you always known you could just sign your name and get whatever you want? This time the laughter was a little louder. Not from the whole room, just a handful of people who saw the moment for what it was. A test. Barron finally shifted. Not in discomfort, not in anger. Just a slow, measured breath, as if weighing the weight of the moment. Rourke felt the energy shift. This was at the moment where the rich kid either stumbled or walked away, proving Rourke's point, without him having to say another word. But something in Barron's expression flickered. Not defeat, not amusement. Something else entirely, and then for the first time, he spoke, and Rourke would regret pushing him. For a moment the air in the ballroom felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for something they weren't sure was coming. Barron Trump, the son of a former president, the subject of endless speculation, had just been challenged in front of a room full of the most powerful people in the country. But he didn't react the way they expected. He didn't laugh nervously. He didn't glance around for help. He didn't brush it off, like a politician's kid trained in damage control. Instead, he let the silence stretch. Let Rourke's words sit there unchallenged. Just long enough to make the journalist think he had won. Then finally he spoke. You know, Mr. Rourke, Barron said, his voice calm, steady. I could pretend your question is original, but it's not. People have been saying things like that to me since I was a kid. They think privilege cancels out struggle, that wealth means life is easy. The shift in the room was immediate. A few guests who had been chuckling earlier stopped. Others leaned in slightly, suddenly aware that this wasn't going to be the response they had expected. Rourke's smirk faltered just a fraction. Barron wasn't speaking just to him anymore. He was speaking to everyone. I didn't choose my last name, he continued, his expression unreadable. I didn't ask for cameras in my face before I was old enough to drive. I didn't sign up for every moment of my childhood to be dissected, criticized, and turned into a headline. Someone near the bar shifted awkwardly, setting their glass down with a quiet clink. Barron exhaled softly, then took a single step forward. Not aggressive, not defensive. Just present. You say I've never had to struggle. Fine, let's talk about struggle. His tone never rose, but the weight behind it did. Rourke blinked. Imagine being 15 and watching grown men on national television make jokes about you, knowing you can't say a word back. Imagine walking into a classroom and realizing half the people there already hate you because of your last name. Imagine knowing that no matter what you do, people will assume they know who you are before you ever open your mouth. A murmur rippled through the room. Not loud, just there. Rourke started to say something, but Barron cut him off, not with force, but with a simple, unshaken truth. No, I've never had to worry about rent. I've never wondered where my next meal would come from. But don't mistake that for never knowing what it's like to feel completely alone in a crowded room. And just like that, the balance shifted. Rourke, the seasoned journalist, who had spent years leading the conversation, suddenly found himself in unfamiliar territory, because Barron wasn't playing the role he had expected. And for the first time in years, people in that room, and soon the world, would actually hear Barron Trump, not just talk about him. The silence that followed wasn't just the absence of laughter. It was thick, the kind that made people shift in their seats, suddenly unsure of the rules of engagement. Rourke stood frozen for a second too long, his smirk now gone. He had walked into this expecting a soundbite, something he could twist, mock, spin into another viral takedown. But instead, he had given Barron Trump something much more powerful. A moment, then from the back of the room, a single clap, not sarcastic, not mocking, just recognition. A second later, another, then another. Within seconds, the slow, deliberate applause spread, rippling across the ballroom. It wasn't an eruption of cheers. This wasn't a rally, but it was genuine. And that, more than anything, was what made it powerful. Rourke swallowed, shifting slightly. He could feel the weight of 100 gazes on him now. Not with admiration, but scrutiny. A waiter near the drinks table discreetly pulled out his phone angling it just enough to capture what was happening. He wasn't alone. Several journalists, influencers, and high-profile guests had already started recording. This moment wasn't staying in that ballroom. The first video hit Twitter at 11:47 p.m. A grainy, slightly shaky clip of Barron's speech. Then another and another within an hour. The hashtag Barron Trump trended not just in the U.S. but worldwide. Some highlighted his poise. Others focused on specific lines. Don't mistake privilege for never knowing what it's like to feel alone in a crowded room. A viral tweet with over 300,000 likes. Whether you like him or not, the kid just cooked a professional journalist. On his own turf, a TikTok comment with 1.2 million views. The media machine scrambled to catch up. Conservative networks praised him. Liberal ones tried to downplay the significance, calling it a well-rehearsed PR moment. But even the most cynical journalists had to admit, it didn't feel rehearsed, it felt real. Even celebrities got in on the conversation. Some defended Rourke, saying he was just asking a fair question. Others, including a few unexpected names, voiced their respect. But perhaps the most surprising reaction came from young people, teenagers and college students, who had never paid much attention to Barron Trump before. For once, this isn't about politics. It's about a kid who's been dragged through the mud his whole life, finally getting to speak for himself. A TikTok video that hit 5 million views overnight. Meanwhile, Rourke went silent. He refused interview requests, ignored emails, and didn't tweet. The man, who had built his career on controlling the narrative, was suddenly at the center of one he couldn't escape. By morning, the entire country was talking about Barron Trump, not as an extension of his father but as his own person. And for the first time, that conversation wasn't being dictated by the media. It was being shaped by the people. By sunrise, the moment had already outgrown the ballroom. It was everywhere, on morning talk shows, in op-eds across social media. News anchors dissected every second of the exchange, while political analysts scrambled to assign meaning to it. Some praised Barron's composure under pressure. Others called it a media stunt. But regardless of opinion, one thing was clear: people were talking. On Fox News, a panel of commentators nodded approvingly. The kid handled himself better than most politicians. Today on CNN, a different perspective. Look, no one's saying he's a bad kid, but let's not pretend he's struggling the way average Americans are. Even the New York Times published an editorial. A new Trump rises. Barron's unexpected moment in the spotlight. The conversation wasn't just about what he said. It was about who was reacting. Some doubled down, claiming that Barron was just playing the victim. What does he know about real hardship? Tweeted a well-known left-wing activist. Others argued that this moment exposed a deeper hypocrisy. Why is it okay to attack a Trump kid, but not anyone else's? One conservative influencer asked. But the most surprising voices came from those who had never defended him before. I'm not a Trump fan, but this was different. He handled that better than I would have. The debate even spilled into late-night TV, where comedians treaded carefully. Look, I'll be honest, one host admitted. I was ready to roast him, but damn, that was a solid response. Even celebrities weighed in. Some praised him, others dismissed it. A well-known actress tweeted, "Rich kid pretends to have problems, and the internet eats it up. What else is new?" But then came the responses. So you can advocate for mental health when it's convenient, but not when it's someone you don't like. That was the moment the conversation shifted. The biggest surprise came from Gen Z and millennials, many of whom had never paid much attention to Barron Trump before. Doesn't matter who his dad is. That hit deep. A TikTok comment with 100K likes. People act like being rich means you can't feel isolated. That's not how it works. A viral Instagram post. Suddenly, Barron Trump wasn't just a political surname. He had become something else. A symbol, a moment. A shift no one knew yet, but what they did know was that, for the first time in years, people were seeing him as his own person. And that was something no one had planned for. The media storm raged on for days. Some networks tried to frame the moment as a one-time anomaly, while others attempted to stretch it into something bigger, a cultural shift, a sign of a new political figure emerging. But Barron, he didn't engage. No interviews, no statements, no carefully worded social media post. He simply moved forward, And that in itself sent a message. Because this wasn't just about Barron Trump. It was about perception, about how easy it is to judge people we've never met, about how a last name can become a prison before you ever get a chance to define yourself. It was about how public figures, especially those born into power, are often treated as symbols rather than human beings. Some people changed their minds about Barron that night. Others didn't, but for the first time in years, people actually saw him, not as an extension of his father, not as a headline, but as a young man standing on his own. And whether they liked him or not, they had to admit he had earned his moment. People are more than the labels placed on them, more than the assumptions made about them. And sometimes the best way to challenge a narrative isn't through outrage or defensiveness. It's through quiet, undeniable truth. Barron Trump didn't argue, he didn't attack. He simply spoke, and in doing so, he forced people to listen. Not everyone will get that opportunity. But when the moment comes, when someone questions your worth, your experiences, your place in the world, you have a choice. You can shrink, or you can stand your ground and make them see you. What do you think? Should people be judged based on their family? Or should they be given a fair chance to define themselves? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this story interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.